If Nazi Germany had succeeded in producing enough heavy water, their nuclear bids would have accelerated. And if that timeline shifted, even by months, one city, London, Moscow, maybe even New York, might have disappeared in a single flash before Hiroshima ever happened. The Germans believed their facility was untouchable, built into the side of a mountain, guarded by soldiers, minefields. No army could get in. But there was one thing they never considered. Not an army, just a small group of men who chose to end. If you're interested in real stories like this, missions that changed history in ways most people never see, subscribe now. Because the deeper you go into this war, the more you realize how close the world came to a very different outcome. Before a single charge was placed, before anyone stepped onto that mountain, the outcome of this mission had already been calculated in numbers. Not by soldiers, by physicists. Because by late 1942, Nazi Germany was no longer chasing a theory. They were chasing a reaction, a controlled nuclear chain reaction. The first step toward a weapon that could change the war in a single moment. And for that reaction to work, they needed one thing above all else: heavy water. Deuterium oxide. A substance so rare, so difficult to produce, that only a handful of facilities in the world could even attempt it. And in occupied Europe, there was only one that mattered. A hydroelectric plant hidden deep inside the mountains of Norway. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Pipes, concrete, steam rising into the cold air. But beneath the surface, below the turbines, below the reinforced floors, machines were running day and night. Electrolysis cells, 18 of them, separating hydrogen from water, molecule by molecule, slowly concentrating the one element Germany needed. Every hour, a little more. Every day, a little closer. The process was painfully slow. But that was the danger, because time, in this case, was not neutral. Every month the plant remained operational, the stockpile grew. And the math was simple. If production continued, Germany would have enough heavy water to sustain a nuclear reactor. If they had a reactor, they would move one step closer to a bomb. And if they reached that point first, the war would no longer be decided by armies or air power. It would be decided by a single flash. The Allied command understood this. They didn't know exactly how far the German program had progressed. They didn't know how close they were to success. But they knew one thing with certainty. They could not allow that facility to keep running. So they tried the obvious solution first. Send men. A direct assault. Operation Freshman. British commandos, trained, equipped, and deployed to strike the target head on. It never reached the factory. The gliders carrying them crashed in a blizzard before they even arrived. Those who survived the impact were captured, interrogated, and executed. Not as prisoners of war, but under direct orders. The message was clear. This target was not just protected, it was defended with absolute ruthlessness. The next option seemed just as simple. Bomb it. Flatten the entire valley from the air. But that solution came with a different problem. The part of the facility that mattered most, the electrolysis chambers, was not exposed. It was buried. Reinforced concrete, built into the mountain itself. Bombers could destroy the buildings above, but the core would likely survive. And even if it didn't, hundreds of Norwegian civilians living in the valley below would be killed in the process. So now, every logical option had been exhausted. Direct assault had failed. Bombing was unreliable and costly, and the facility continued to operate, day after day, week after week, producing the one material that could shift the balance of the war. That's when the problem changed. It was no longer, how do we destroy the factory? It became something far more difficult. How do you reach a target that no one has ever successfully reached? Because the Germans had done everything right. They guarded the bridges, they mined the roads, they stationed soldiers around the perimeter. They watched every direction that made sense. And in doing so, they created something that looked, on paper, completely secure. But security built on logic has one weakness. It only protects against what people believe is possible. And somewhere in the frozen mountains of Norway, a different answer was beginning to take shape. By the time the Allies began planning a second attempt, they weren't starting from zero. They were starting from failure. A failure that had already proven one thing: reaching the target was harder than destroying it. Operation Freshman had not just failed, it had collapsed before it even began. 2 gliders, towed across the North Sea, flying low to avoid detection, blind in a storm that erased the horizon. They never made it. One crashed into the mountains, the other lost control and broke apart on impact. Those who survived the wreckage didn't survive for long. Captured by German forces, interrogated, then executed under Hitler's commando order. No trial, no mercy. The message spread quickly through Allied command. This was not a mission you failed and tried again. This was a mission you failed and disappeared. And yet, the factory continued to run, uninterrupted, untouched, still producing heavy water day after day, which meant doing nothing was no longer an option. But neither was repeating the same mistake. So the question changed again, not how to attack, but whether an attack was even possible. Because everything about the target said it wasn't. The facility sat in Rjukan Valley, carved into the side of a mountain. From above, it looked exposed. But that was an illusion. The most important part of the operation, the electrolysis chambers, was buried deep inside reinforced concrete, protected by the mountain itself. Airstrikes could hit the surface, but they could not guarantee destruction of what mattered. And any large-scale bombing would come at a cost. The valley below wasn't empty. It was home to Norwegian civilians, workers, families, people already living under occupation. Destroying the factory from the air meant destroying them too. So that option, however simple, was pushed aside, which left the ground. And the ground was worse. Every approach route to the facility had been accounted for. The main bridge, the only direct access, was under constant guard. Searchlights, checkpoints, armed soldiers, every movement controlled, every crossing watched. Beyond that, the roads were mined. Patrols moved through the surrounding terrain. Ski units trained to track movement across snow. There was no blind spot, no gap, no direction that hadn't already been considered. At least, none that made sense. And that was the problem. Because the Germans weren't careless. They had built a system based on logic. They defended every route an army would take, every path a vehicle could follow, every direction an attacker would realistically choose. On paper, it was perfect. Which is why the conclusion inside Allied command began to settle into something uncomfortable. This mission might not be possible at all. Not with a conventional force. Not with another direct assault. And not with a plan that followed the same rules the Germans were already expecting. That's when one man stepped forward with a different perspective. Not as a soldier, but as someone who knew the target better than anyone else alive. Leif Tronstad. Before the war, he had helped design the very system now being used by the Germans. The layout, the machinery, the exact position of every critical component in the basement. He understood something the maps could not show, where the structure was strongest, and more importantly, where it wasn't. When he looked at the plans for bombing the facility, he didn't see a solution. He saw a mistake. The electrolysis chamber sat below ground level, encased in reinforced concrete, integrated into the mountain itself. You could destroy everything above it and still fail to stop production. And in the process, you would kill the very people the Allies were trying to protect. So he rejected the simplest plan, not because it was difficult, but because it wouldn't work. Instead, he proposed something that sounded far less certain. A smaller force, fewer men, no large-scale assault, no visible approach. Just a team that could move through the terrain in ways the Germans didn't expect. Men who knew the mountains, who could survive in conditions that would stop a conventional unit cold. Men who didn't need roads, or bridges, or permission. But even that idea had a problem. Before you could send a team in, you had to answer one question first. Was there actually a way to reach the factory without being seen? Because if there wasn't, then it didn't matter how skilled the team was, or how precise the plan looked on paper. They would never make it inside. And somewhere, high above the valley, on a frozen plateau where 4 men had already been waiting for months, that question was about to be answered. Long before anyone attempted to reach the factory, 4 men were already out there. Not attacking, not advancing, just surviving. October 1942. A small aircraft crosses the Norwegian coastline under cover of darkness. Inside, 4 Norwegian operatives prepare to jump. No lights, no margin for error. Below them, the Hardangervidda Plateau, a vast frozen wilderness stretching for miles in every direction. No roads, no shelter, just wind, ice, and snow. They jump anyway, white parachutes opening against the black sky. And then, silence. Operation Grouse. Their mission was simple, at least on paper. Land on the plateau, establish contact, scout the area around the factory, and guide a larger assault force in when it arrived. But the assault never came, because far away, in the same storm that covered their landing, Operation Freshman had already failed. The gliders crashed, the commandos were gone, and the 4 men on the plateau were left alone. No extraction, no reinforcement, no second plan, just a radio and instructions from London. Stay in position, wait, find a way in. So they waited. November, December, January, The temperature dropped to -30. Wind cut through clothing like it wasn't there. Food ran out. What little they had was stretched as far as it could go. After that, they ate whatever they could find. Reindeer moss scraped from rocks, lichen pulled from frozen ground. Anything that could keep the body moving for one more day. Fires were limited. Smoke could be seen for kilometers. German patrols moved across the plateau on skis, searching for any sign of activity. Every decision became a calculation: warmth or visibility, movement or survival. One of the men began to lose weight rapidly, from 80 kilos to 55, his ribs visible even through layers of clothing. 4 men, 4 months, and still no clear answer. Because surviving the plateau wasn't the mission. Finding a way into the factory was. And up to this point, there was none. Every known route led to the same conclusion. The bridge was impossible. Guarded, watched. Any attempt to cross it would end before it began. But there was one thing the maps showed. Something the Germans had already evaluated and dismissed. Below the facility, a gorge. 200 meters deep, steep rock walls dropping straight down into a narrow river. Frozen in parts, flowing in others. The official assessment was simple: impassable for military purposes, which made it, for anyone thinking logically, completely useless. So one man decided to test it anyway. Klaus Hellberg. He left the cabin alone, no backup, no rope, no guarantee he would make it back. Just a single objective: find out if the impossible route was truly impossible. He reached the edge of the gorge at night, looked down into darkness. No clear path, no visible bottom, just depth, cold, and risk. Then he started climbing, step by step, hands searching for holds in frozen rock, feet finding edges he couldn't see. No sound, no light. If he slipped, there would be no second chance. The descent took hours, every movement deliberate, every mistake potentially fatal. At the bottom, he found the river. Black water moving between shelves of ice. Not fully frozen, not safe, but crossable. He made it across, then began the climb up the other side. Steeper, looser, the kind of terrain that shifts under your weight. But eventually, he reached something unexpected. A narrow railway track, cut into the side of the mountain, hidden from above, leading directly toward the lower levels of the facility. No guards, no mines, no patrols, because no one had ever come from that direction before. He followed it just far enough to confirm what mattered. This route didn't just reach the factory. It bypassed everything. No bridge, no checkpoint, no searchlights. A path that existed outside the logic of the German defenses. Then he turned around, climbed back down, crossed the river again, and made the ascent back up the original side. Alone, in the dark, with nothing but memory to guide him. When he returned to the cabin, he didn't need to explain much. 4 men looked at the map, looked at each other, and understood immediately what it meant. There was a way in, but it came with a cost. To use that route, every man would have to descend that gorge, in the dark, without ropes, carrying equipment. then climb back out the other side. If anyone fell, there would be no recovery, no rescue, no second attempt. And still, they sent the message. Short, simple, clear. We have a way in. What they didn't know was that London was already preparing to send a new team. Not professional commandos, not a large force, just a handful of men who would soon be asked to do something no military unit had ever attempted before. By the time the message reached London, the situation had already changed. There was now a way in, not an easy one, not a safe one, but a real one, which meant the question was no longer if the factory could be reached, but who would be sent to do it. Because this wasn't a mission you assigned to just anyone. It wasn't a matter of training alone, or rank, or experience in conventional combat. The men chosen for this operation would have to survive in conditions where training stopped being enough. They would have to move through terrain that could kill them before the enemy ever had the chance. And if everything went wrong, there would be no extraction, no reinforcement, no second attempt. So the selection began, not from regular units, but from a different kind of force. Norwegian operatives trained in exile, men who had escaped occupation and were now waiting for a chance to go back. They came from different backgrounds: fishermen, students, athletes, skiers who had spent their entire lives in the mountains. They weren't chosen because they were the strongest or the most aggressive. They were chosen because they understood something others didn't: how to move through that environment, as if they belonged there. At the center of that group was a 23-year-old man, Joachim Ronneberg, a ski instructor before the war. Quiet, controlled, the kind of leader who didn't speak unless he had something to say. And when he did, people listened. He was given a simple instruction: choose your team. No guidelines, no restrictions, just the responsibility of deciding who would take part in a mission that might not have a return. So he chose carefully, not based on rank, but on trust. Men who could think under pressure, men who could stay silent when it mattered, men who wouldn't panic when things started to go wrong, because they would. For weeks, they trained in the Scottish Highlands, not for a conventional assault, but for something far more precise: how to move without being heard, how to navigate in darkness, how to approach a target without leaving a trace, and most importantly, how to destroy a system without destroying everything around it. Because this mission had a constraint that made it even harder. They were not there to level the facility. They were there to disable it, to destroy the electrolysis equipment and nothing else. No collateral damage, no civilian casualties, no reason for the Germans to retaliate against the population below. Precision over force. Every charge had to be placed correctly. Every movement had to be controlled. There would be no margin for improvisation once they were inside. Before deployment, each man was given something small, easy to miss: a glass capsule, cyanide. A final instruction delivered without emphasis: if captured, use it. Because if they were taken alive, the mission wouldn't just fail, it would unravel. Routes exposed, contacts revealed, everything compromised. So there would be no rescue, no negotiation, no survival beyond that point. Each man understood what that meant, not in theory, but in practice. Runeberg placed the capsule in his pocket. He would carry it with him for the next 3 weeks, a constant reminder of what this mission required. Not just skill, not just endurance, but acceptance. Because from this point forward, every step they took was a step deeper into something they might not come back from. On February 16th, 1943, they boarded a bomber. No lights, no heat, just the sound of engines cutting through the night. Equipment checked, explosives secured, fuses cut to precise lengths. Everything exactly where it needed to be. Hours later, they jumped. Into darkness, into a storm, into a landscape that had already tested the men waiting below to their limits. They landed scattered across the plateau, wind pushing against them, snow reducing visibility to almost nothing. The first night wasn't about the mission. It was about survival. Digging into the snow with bare hands, creating shelter just deep enough to last until morning. Because before they could reach the factory, before they could even begin the operation, they had to solve one more problem. Find the 4 men who had been waiting for them. Somewhere in that endless white landscape. No markers, no clear direction, just a rough position and a radio signal that had already gone silent. For the next several days, they searched, moving through the storm, following terrain that looked the same in every direction, until finally, they found them. The grouse team, alive, but barely recognizable. 4 months on the plateau had changed them. Hollow faces, sunken eyes, bodies worn down by cold and hunger. But they had what mattered: information. Runeberg spread the map out, the bridge, the guards, the gorge. One look was enough. The decision didn't take long. There would be no alternative plan, no safer route, only the one that had already been tested. Before they moved out, Runeberg gave one final instruction. If anyone falls, the mission continues. No one stops, no one goes back, because from this point on, the objective mattered more than any single man. And the only way forward was down. February 27th, 1943, 11:15 p.m. 11 men stand at the edge of the gorge. Behind them, snow. Ahead of them, nothing. No visible path, no clear descent, just a drop into darkness that no army had ever attempted to cross. This was the route, the only one. Runeberg looks at the team. No speech, no final words. There's nothing left to say. Then he steps forward and disappears over the edge. The descent begins. No ropes, no climbing gear, just hands, boots, and whatever the mountain allows. He moves slowly, testing each hold before shifting his weight, feeling the rock through thick gloves, finding stability in places he can't see. Behind him, the others follow, single file, each man spaced just far enough apart that if one falls, he doesn't take the next with him. The rules are simple. No talking, no lights, no noise. Because sound carries in a gorge. A single loose stone can echo for hundreds of meters. And above them, on the bridge, German guards stand close enough to hear a man scream. No one screams. The temperature sits below -5. Every surface coated in ice. Some sections nearly vertical. Fingers dig into cracks. Boots search for edges that may not exist. One man slips. His foot loses purchase. For a second, he's weightless. Then his hand catches a frozen branch. He hangs there, suspended over nothing. 3 seconds, long enough to understand exactly how far down it is. Then he pulls himself back. No one moves to help. No one speaks. They keep going. Halfway down, a boot strikes loose rock. The stone breaks free, falls, hits the wall. Then again, a sharp crack echoes through the gorge. 11 men freeze against the cliff, eyes lifting toward the bridge above. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. No shout. No searchlight. No alarm. The sound disappears into the dark. They move again. At the bottom, the river, not fully frozen. Black water moving between sheets of ice. And here, one mistake ends everything. If your boots get wet, you have minutes. Cold spreads fast. Numbness follows. And once your feet stop working, you don't climb. You don't run. You don't escape. You die. Or worse, you get captured. They find the narrowest crossing, stones barely visible above the waterline. One by one, jumping from rock to rock, balancing in darkness. No room for hesitation. No second attempt if you fall. Each man makes it across. Now, the climb up the other side. Steeper, looser, more unstable than the descent. But their bodies are warmer now, adrenaline pushing through exhaustion. They climb, slow, controlled, deliberate. Until finally, they reach something solid, a narrow railway track, cut into the side of the mountain, exactly where Helberg said it would be. And just like he reported, unguarded. No patrols, no mines, no signs of defense. Because from this direction, there was nothing to defend. They are inside the perimeter, and the Germans have no idea. Ahead, the factory. Dark windows, steam rising from pipes. A single guard near the main entrance, walking his route. Breath visible in the cold. He doesn't look toward the gorge. Why would he? No one comes from there. The Germans built a fortress. They guarded every road, watched every bridge, secured every path that made sense, and left the one that didn't completely open. Now 11 men stand inside that blind spot, 5 of them carrying enough explosive to end Germany's nuclear progress in a single night. Ronneberg splits the team. 5 remain outside, cover unit. Their job? Watch the approaches, protect the escape route. And if things go wrong, hold off an entire garrison for as long as they can. There is no expectation of survival, just delay. Inside, the demolition team moves, 5 men, toward the structure, toward the target. They find the cable tunnel, just as the blueprint described. A narrow opening where wires and pipes feed into the building, barely wide enough for a man to pass through. One by one, they crawl inside. The air changes, warmer, thicker, carrying the metallic scent of machinery, the hum of the plant vibrating through the walls. They reach the basement level. The electrolysis hall is close. Runeberg reaches the door, tries it. Locked. No surprise. They move to the window. Kaiser wraps his arm in cloth, strikes the glass. It shatters. The sound cuts through the corridor, sharp, too loud. 5 men freeze, pressed against concrete, listening. Footsteps above them, moving, getting closer. Every second stretches, every breath controlled. If the alarm is raised now, it ends here. The footsteps stop. Silence. Then, they move away. A door closes somewhere above. The patrol continues. They weren't heard, or they weren't noticed. Either way, the window is open. They climb inside, and there, lined up in rows, 18 metal cylinders, the heart of the operation. Heavy water, collected, stored, waiting. Months of production, contained in steel. Then, a voice from the corner. "Who's there?" A man at a desk, a Norwegian night watchman, staring directly at them. 5 armed men inside a space no one should have been able to reach. This is the moment. Not the explosives, not the escape. This. Because one shout is enough. One word and the entire garrison comes down on them. Ronneberg steps forward, speaks quietly in Norwegian. "We're here to destroy the German equipment. Stay silent and you won't be harmed." The man looks at them, at their faces, at their weapons, at the uniforms that don't belong to the enemy. He understands. Not the full mission, not the details, but enough. He nods, lies down, face to the floor, and says nothing. In that moment, the mission continues. They don't waste time. There are 18 cylinders, 18 targets. Each one must be destroyed, not damaged, not delayed, destroyed. Because if even a few survive, the system can be rebuilt, production can resume, and everything they risked getting here becomes meaningless. They move fast, but not rushed. Every action controlled, every placement deliberate. 1 charge per cylinder, positioned exactly where the metal is weakest, just as Tronstad's blueprints showed. They are not here to bring the building down. They are here to cripple its heart. Quietly, precisely, so that when the Germans assess the damage, they see what happened, but not how. Halfway through, a problem. One detonator won't seat properly. The thread catches, slips, catches again. Time is moving. The window is closing. Ronneberg kneels, removes his glove, bare skin against cold metal. At -5, that's not a small decision. It's pain, immediate, sharp, but necessary. He steadies his hand, aligns the fitting, pushes. This time, it clicks into place. The connection holds. He pulls the glove back on, his fingers already stiff. No one says anything. They keep moving. 15, 16, 17, 18. All charges set, fuses cut, short. 30 seconds, maybe less. There is no time for error. Ronneberg checks each connection, one by one, visually, by touch. Because if one fails, the mission fails with it. Satisfied, he reaches into his pocket, pulls out a match, strikes it, Nothing. The head breaks. For a moment, everything stops. A single failed match in a room full of explosives. And the only thought that crosses his mind, I should have brought more. He strikes another. This one catches. The flame holds. He lowers it to the fuse. It ignites. 30 seconds. They turn immediately. No hesitation, no running. Running makes noise. Noise gets attention. They move fast, but controlled. Back through the broken window, into the corridor, toward the tunnel. 20 seconds. Through the narrow passage. One man at a time. No room to rush. 10 seconds. They emerge outside. Cold air hits instantly. They're still inside the perimeter, still exposed, still vulnerable. Then, the explosion. Not a fireball, not a collapse, just a deep, contained thud, followed by something else. Liquid. Heavy water spilling across concrete. Months of production gone in seconds. Alarms trigger, sirens cut through the valley. German soldiers pour out of the barracks. Searchlights sweep across the bridge, the roads, the checkpoints. Every direction that makes sense, but not the one that doesn't. By the time the first patrol reaches the basement, the team is already moving, back toward the gorge, back the way they came. The descent, the crossing, the climb, reversed, but no less dangerous. Halfway up, a searchlight shifts. The beam drops off the bridge, slides down the rock face. Closer. Closer. 5 meters from the last man in line. He presses flat against the cliff. Doesn't move. Doesn't breathe. The light lingers, then drifts away. The guard looks down into the darkness, pauses, then turns back. Why would anyone be down there? Minutes later, they reach the top, skis waiting where they left them. Runneberg gives the order. Split up. 5 men head east, toward Sweden. 400 kilometers, on skis, at night, sleeping in snow during the day. Tracks behind them, clear in fresh snow. A signature the Germans can follow. If they're found, it's over. But by morning, snow begins to fall. By midday, the tracks are gone, erased. The others disappear into the resistance. Safe houses, new identities, no pattern, no trace. Behind them, chaos. Thousands of German soldiers mobilized, search teams combing the region, interrogations, arrests. No answers. Because there are none to find. Not the kind they're looking for. The Germans know the factory was hit. They know it was sabotage. But they don't know how anyone got inside. And that may be the most important part. The official report would later describe the operation as one of the most successful acts of sabotage in the entire war. No shots fired, no men lost, no civilians harmed. Even the night watchman, the only witness, said nothing. When questioned, he claimed he saw no one. He heard the explosion and ran. He chose his side twice, once in the moment and once after. But the story didn't end there, because the damage, while devastating, was not permanent. The Germans rebuilt the system, replaced the damaged cells, restarted production. But something had changed, not just the machines, the timeline. They were no longer ahead, they were catching up. And that delay mattered, because months later, the Allies struck again. American bombers hit the facility from the air. This time, the damage forced a different decision. Abandon the site, move what remained. The heavy water was loaded onto a train, transported across Norway, then placed onto a ferry, the SF Hydro. Destination: Germany. If it arrived, production could continue elsewhere. If it didn't, the program would fall behind again. So the resistance acted. A bomb was placed inside the vessel, and on February 20th, 1944, it detonated. The ferry sank into the depths of Lake Tinn, along with the cargo, and along with it, 14 Norwegian civilians. Passengers, workers, people who had nothing to do with the mission. The price of stopping something bigger. The kind of cost that doesn't appear in strategic reports, but never disappears completely. Years later, when the wreck was examined, the barrels recovered told the final part of the story. The concentration of heavy water inside them was still far below what Germany needed. They never reached the threshold. They never completed a working reactor. They never got close enough. And history moved forward without the outcome they had been working toward. After the war, Ronneberg was asked a simple question. What would have happened if the mission had failed? He thought about it. Not long. Then gave an answer that didn't need explanation. London might have looked like Hiroshima. And that's the part history rarely shows. Not what happened, but what didn't. Because sometimes, the most important moments in history are the ones that leave no visible trace. If this story surprised you, there are many more like it. Hidden operations, impossible missions, and moments that shaped history without anyone noticing. Click the next video on your screen, and you'll see just how many times history almost went a different way.